74% of all suicides in the UK are men. But why is this happening? And more importantly, what can we do to change it? In this very special magazine-style episode, I am joined by three people who can talk with us and help educate us about three very high-risk areas for men. The first is Lee, an ex-Marine who now works in the building trade. Our next is Sharon, a researcher and farmer's wife, who has a really good overview of farming life and farming community. And last but not least, I'm joined by Charlie, the CEO of Men's Sheds UK, whose organisation is all about transforming lives by giving men a safe space to get connected, feel supported, and build meaningful connections. This episode is more than just about understanding the problem. It's about finding real, practical, workable solutions for reducing suicidality in men. Whether you're directly affected or looking to support someone who is, I hope that you find this to be a crucially important conversation. Hi, welcome along to the Aspiring Psychologist podcast. I am Dr. Marianne Trent, a qualified clinical psychologist. Now, in the UK, it is more common for women to be diagnosed with depression. And yet, of course, as our intro revealed, it is men who are higher in the suicide rates, with 74% of suicides in the UK in 2022 being males. It's often discussed that there are certain industries that do seem to have a higher rate of suicides. So I really wanted to use this space to explore that, to empower you, to help you think about questions to ask people that may be around you. And I think this is really important because sometimes we might feel like we don't have the necessary knowledge, we don't know what to say, we don't want to say the wrong thing. So by watching this, hopefully this will help you feel like you are enough and you know enough to point somebody in the right direction and to instill a sense of hope. You may notice as this episode progresses, there's various different stages of Marianne because it's been recorded across the summer. At one point, I have a mole. Then I have a bandage on my face. Now I've got a wound. Stick with it and you'll get the flow of what was recorded when. These are really important conversations to have, and I wanted to get our experts booked in and get these interviews recorded. I've previously chatted to Lee, not on the podcast, but in a social media conversation around about the pandemic time. He is so brilliant and inspiring. I love chatting with Lee. So let's dive in, let's meet him, and I will catch you on the other side of this. Hi, Lee. Welcome along to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Marianne. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I always love speaking with you. And since we last spoke, you've had a change of your business. You were previously working in fitness and you from an ex-military background, but you are now working in quite a different area. You've really taken control and you're doing something very different now, aren't you? What are you doing now?
Yeah, well, basically, I went from being a Royal Marine to owning a boot camp fitness business. COVID sort of saw the end of that. Bit of a long story, but yeah, COVID was the end of the fitness business. And I now find myself operating a mini crane, installing steel beams for builders on building sites every day. So yeah, a bit of a contrast from what I was doing before.
Very different, but I know from following you on socials and from our chat beforehand, this is really invigorating for you. You're really enjoying it, and you're a father, you're a husband, and this is really helping to help you do all the things you love to provide for your family, but also your own mental health.
Yeah, that's it exactly. When the fitness business came to an end, as you know, it's a bit of a long story. I know we're limited for time. So I won't go into it too much, but yeah, I've always been conscious of my mental health. I had a few issues, to say the least, when I was a bit younger. So since then, I've always been, really keen to prioritise my mental health. And I understand that your job, what you do for a living, what you get up out of bed and go and do for 8 hours a day, 9 hours, well, sometimes more, can have a massive impact on your mental health. If you don't enjoy what you're doing, it can impact your mood and your energy. You know, when you go home, you take that mood and energy home with you. It then starts to impact your relationship, your parenting, your diet, and then all this has a bit of a snowball effect, and it can be obviously detrimental to say the least. So yeah, when I was looking for something to do after my fitness business, I gave it a huge amount of thought. And to be honest, that was one of the main sort of priorities really, was finding something that I thought I'd be happy doing, I'd enjoy doing, so that I took home at the end of each working day a positive energy into my house. As you mentioned, I'm married. I've got a lovely wife, I've got 4 beautiful little kids, and I didn't want to come home in a foul mood and let that foul mood affect everybody else. You know, it's just something that to me is super, super important.
Yeah, I think what I love about what you've done is that, you know, you've demonstrated that actually you can do a career change at whatever stage of your life. You know, I know that you had young twins at the time when this was happening as well. And you
So,
were like, well, this is the right time for me, and this is going to be giving me the chance to live my authentic self, you know, in my family, and to have the kids grow up with a happy dad, really.
yeah, that's what
Yeah.
was important to me. You know, don't get me wrong, I love my dad to bits. He's a brilliant dad, and he worked so hard to provide for me and my sister and put a roof over our heads, put food on the table. And but I knew, you know, I didn't know at the time, but looking back, I understand he was under a lot of pressure. He didn't particularly enjoy what he was doing. For example, my dad, he used to work in a factory all day, and he used to say that in the winter he didn't see sunlight. He'd get up really early in the morning, go to the factory, work all day, do overtime. By the time he'd come out, it was pitch black again. He hadn't seen the sunlight all day. Then he'd come home and he'd start fixing cars. He was good with cars, and I remember him. He'd be lying in our back entry at home in the snow on his back underneath the car, welding cars. And you know, he was brilliant in that respect. But at the same time, not all the time. Sometimes it didn't take much to set him off. He'd lose his temper, start shouting and swearing and banging the table and all the rest of it. And you know, I want to be, you know, keen. I'm keen not to sound like I'm bad mouthing my dad. I'm not, because I understand what pressure he was under. You know, getting up and doing something that you hate all day, coming home and lying in the snow welding cars. I can understand why he used to lose his temper a bit sometimes. But I was just keen to, you know, as a father now myself, not to repeat that pattern.
Yeah.
Basically, try and come home every day with
Absolutely.
a good mood.
It really reduces your window of tolerance when you are not vibing off what you're
Yeah,
doing. I don't think I'm young enough or cool enough to say vibing, but there you go. I've gone for it. I've
yeah,
said it. It really does change your outlook, and it changes your capacity to do all of your roles, all of your responsibilities, but also to just do you.
yeah. That's it. It's you know, you can't do something that you hate all day and then come home to your family and be all happy and cheery and play with the kids and have some banter with your wife and, you know, read stories and, you know, out at bedtime. You can't do all that stuff if you just come home miserable and you want to just open a beer and a bag of crisps and sit on the sofa and binge watch YouTube videos or whatever. You know, if you do something you quite enjoy all day, you come home and you're in a positive mood and you're ready to be that husband and you're ready to be that father that you know, I aspire to be, and probably a lot of men aspire to be, but they find it difficult because they're slogging away at something they don't particularly enjoy all day.
Well done to you. That's absolutely, you know, I'm so pleased that you found that and that you're achieving that for your family.
Yeah,
With your experiences of the building trade, you know, I'm
yeah,
very aware that there's a very high demographic, it's not a very nice term, but of high suicide rates in the building trade. And I'm also
yeah,
aware, you know, that within that, there'd be a wide spectrum of people from kind of jobbing 16, 17-year-olds learning trade and
yeah,
doing kind of bricklaying and scaffolding apprenticeships and stuff, right
yeah,
up to company owners. You know, this is a big scope of people that we're kind of discussing
yeah,
here.
yeah.
What's your take on why the rates for suicide are so high in this industry, Lee?
I've got to be honest, Marianne, I was actually shocked when I found this out because I entered the construction industry. I wouldn't call myself a tradesman, because I just basically operate a crane at the end of the day and install steel beams. But I'm still in the construction industry, and I entered it because I thought it would be good for my mental health, and it actually is. I love it. I'm outside all day. I'm getting plenty of sunlight. It's physical what I do, so I'm getting a form of exercise. I'm with the lads all day. No, don't want to be politically incorrect, but I just love working in a male-dominated environment. It's a little bit dangerous. You have to stay switched on, otherwise, potentially I could get hurt or somebody else could get hurt. So when I decided to take this route, I thought to myself, when was the happiest time of my life, work-wise? And it was when I was in the Royal Marines. So I thought, okay, when I was in the Marines, what was it that made me happy? And like I said, it was being outside, it was doing physical stuff, dangerous stuff, having to stay switched on, being with the lads, having a bit of banter and good laugh, and taking the mickey out of each other and all that kind of thing. So that's why I joined the construction industry, because I thought it'd be very, very similar, and I'm loving it. But since we spoke the other week, and somebody else actually mentioned to me that the construction industry has a high suicide rate, I just got to try to think, like, why is that? Why is it that I'm loving it? And don't get me wrong, a lot of the builders I speak to, they say they love it, say they enjoy it. So I know it, obviously it can be enjoyed. But yeah, giving it some thought, I've come up with a few things. The first thing that occurred to me is perhaps that what I do is very, very varied. I go to a different building site every day, meet a different bunch of lads. I've got a different problem or a different set of problems to overcome. I'm travelling sort of all over the Midlands and the Northwest, so I'm seeing a bit of the country as I'm driving around, meeting different people. And maybe if you haven't got that variety, if you're just turning up on a building site every day and laying 1,000 bricks, you go home, go to bed, get up the next day, go back to the same building site, lay another 1,000 bricks, and that's your life, week in, week out, just laying perhaps a lack of variety. And I'm just using the brickies as an example. I'm sure there's other areas of the building industry where there is that lack of variety. So that was the first thing that came to my head. Second thing I've noticed is on a lot of building sites I go to, and I'm not trying to be judgmental here, but their diet is atrocious. It's all Greggs. I don't know if I'm allowed to name names. Sorry if I'm not allowed to name names, but it's basically fast food, junk food, bags of crisps, bottles of pop, etc., etc. And I think a lot of people don't understand the relationship between the food that we eat, sugars, refined carbohydrates, all the chemicals that they put in processed food these days. A lot of people don't understand the link between that and their mental health. So I think a lot of builders would probably benefit from cleaning their diet up. Obviously, there's a bit of a drinking culture. A lot of builders, they'll go for a few beers on the way home, or they spend all weekend having a few beers, drinking basically. And as you know, obviously, alcohol is a depressant. Doesn't do you any good from a mental point of view. So if you're sort of combining all this. Oh, and another thing I've thought about as well is status. I found a little bit that if you're walking around in a suit, or you've got a laptop case, like a briefcase, for example, or perhaps when I was a PT, and I was in a tracksuit or a vest, I was looking in shape. People look at you differently. Whereas if you got work boots on and you're covered in mud and you're soaking wet and you got all muck all over your face and your hair's everywhere, I don't know, there's like I don't know what the word is. I don't know if stigma is the right word, but I think some people in society can sort of look down on workmen, on tradesmen. I remember at school, or somebody said to me the other day actually, that when they were at school, the teachers used to say, if you don't try hard, you'll end up working on a building site. And there's that sort of, so I don't know if some lads in the trades feel like they lack a bit of status in society. I don't know. I'm just trying to You know, I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm just trying to throw
No,
things
I
out
think
there.
I think you're right. You know, I think I can remember that sort of being said and threatened and around, and
Yeah.
maybe, you know, what we know is that perhaps people that do find formal education more tricky
Yeah.
are more likely to end up in kind of hands-on manual labor professions.
Yeah.
And so maybe there are more people that are perhaps struggling with some
Yeah.
of the, I don't know, the interfacing of kind of modern life and
Yeah.
keeping up with everybody else and the shame and stigma.
Yeah.
Maybe people are ending up in the building trade who
Yeah.
didn't thrive in school or didn't find it the easiest or weren't
Yeah.
supported
Yeah.
optimally to
That's it.
overcome dyslexia, to kind of think about
Yeah.
ADHD, all of those
Yeah.
kind of different things that make engaging in education trickier.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'd just like to say at this point, I think there's a massive difference between academic intelligence, people that can read books and sort of memorize it and regurgitate it, or even, you know, understand it, hopefully. There's a big difference between academic intelligence and practical intelligence and common sense. I work on some building sites, and you can tell that they're a very, very good builder. And some of the things that I see them come up with to overcome problems, to get these steel beams in, and all their work is immaculate. You know, they've got a really neat, tidy, clean site. And you can just tell that they're very, very proud of their professional capabilities. And I can, you know, almost guarantee a lot of these lads that are fantastic builders, carpenters, you know, electricians, plumbers, all these kinds of people, they're very, very skilled. And a lot of the work they do is dangerous, and it's hard work, and it's in unpleasant conditions. Oftentimes you're cold and wet. And when I think back on the attitude to these guys, when I was at school by the teachers, not all of them obviously, but some of the teachers, and the way like I say, sometimes society look down on tradesmen, the work some of these guys do in, like I say, unpleasant conditions, hard graft, it's, you know, I take my hat off to them. And I think a lot of tradesmen should recognise the contribution that they make to society. You know, where would we be without these guys? You know, they build our houses, they fix our houses, they fix our roofs. You know, any pipes start leaking, your lights go out. You know, these guys will come out and they fix it for you. And I think they need to give themselves a pat on the back for that and understand, you know, they do a lot of things that these more academic people just couldn't do, either couldn't do or wouldn't want to do. And
I hear you. And today we've had someone out to look at our guttering. So
yeah,
exactly that. And my husband was like, oh, I could do it. It's got to the stage where he's gonna be 49, and he's like, it's gonna be really hard for me to do that. Like, I think we should get someone in. I was like, yeah, I totally support that. Like, you know, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, these guys fulfil like a vital role, and we'd be lost without them, and they need to give themselves some credit for that. It's just a different type of intelligence and aptitude and common sense, you know. And it's some of the lads, like I say, blow my mind. Some of the things they come up with to have their problem solving abilities and the pride they take in their work and the you know the things they construct is fantastic. And yeah,
I think you could be the difference that makes a difference here, Lee. I feel like more sites need to be run by compassionate leaders like you are and like you would be, kind of pointing out, actually, I can see that you struggle with XYZ, but this is incredible. Like, you should be really proud of this, and just try and help lift people up and see themselves as an asset, as doing good things, not of perhaps looking at a deficit, looking at things they can't do.
Yeah, that's it. So if you got the lads and they started understanding how sort of valuable they are and what skill sets they've got, and understanding that's actually, you know, they're a massive credit to society. If you sort of change their mindset in that respect, and if they clean their diets up a little bit, maybe cut down on the boozing, and maybe did a bit of exercise, or what was the other thing I mentioned? Yeah, maybe added a little bit of variety. If they thought to themselves, I do get a bit bored laying these bricks, or I do get a bit bored doing this or that, how can I add a little bit more variety into my job? Then perhaps, so like I say, those things either individually or combined could improve their mental health, and maybe do something about the suicide rate. I don't know.
Yeah, amazing. I love those ideas. And actually, if anyone's listening to this and thinking, well, I've got a builder coming into clinic next week, these are really good examples to be able to discuss with them, but also really empowering them to think about, well, if we could make a change, what would that look like? What would be enough? If you woke up tomorrow and you didn't feel like this, what would need to have changed? And it might be that they kind of drawing on what you've said, like, actually, this job that I've been in for 5 years, it's not igniting me. And they might then come kind of with a problem focused narrative of, I can't change my job because I'm 10 years away from retirement, or I won't find another job, or no one else will want me, or I've only ended up in this job because I came in from school. And challenge that. I know that we can kind of pigeonhole ourselves, but just, I believe in infinite possibility for change and rehabilitation, and that we can live successful, happy, fulfilling lives. And I know you feel the same way.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I like I said, I do try and talk to the lads when I'm on site, and I do say to them, how long you been a builder? A lot of them say, since I left school. I say, do you enjoy it? And like I say, a lot of them, I'd say that most of them say, yeah, I love it. Now, you've got to bear in mind, some of them might be lying, because a lot of people just say, yeah, I love it, even if they don't. But some of them do say, I hate it. I can't, but I say, well, why do you keep doing it then? Why don't you do something else? They go, I couldn't do anything else. I've done this since I left school. I've done. And I don't feel, at that point, I don't feel like it's my place to try and coach them or lecture them or try and talk. It's not my place, really. I don't think in that environment to try and help them, or try and instigate a career change. I'm there to install the steel beam, and that work to get a life lesson.
I hear you, but I guess what you're saying is that they haven't necessarily experienced an upbringing where they realize that you can be really, really happy in your job and love it, and sing about it, almost like perhaps if they've been raised in an environment like you were, where your dad actually didn't really like his job and he wasn't fulfilled by it, and then he kind of had to live for the weekends, really. And if other people on building sites have had that experience and then go on to have the same experience themselves, they kind of develop that belief that this is just what work is, and it's all just kind of drudgery, really, until you retire or die. And that's not particularly hope-filling, is it?
No, that's it. I think, I hope you'll agree, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think to have good mental health, I think part of it is optimism. You need to be able to look at the next 6 months, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, the next 20 or 30 years with a sense of optimism. You need to be looking forward to your future. Whereas if all you can see in your future is getting up every day and going to something that you hate, obviously, common sense dictates that isn't good for your mental health. Just looking forward and not wanting to do it. I've gone from marine to fitness business owner to crane hire business owner. And if anyone's listening to this and it resonates, I just have a look at me. I've just gone from one thing, made an extreme move to another, and then I've done it again. I've done it with babies at home, very young children, 4 very young children, bills and mortgage to pay and all the rest of it. And I'm not saying it's easy. It's not. It's actually very, very hard. It's risky. You lose a lot of sleep. Your anxiety levels will go up. It's a difficult transition. But in my opinion, I've probably got, I've been going 18 months, and it's only just really in the last maybe 4 or 5 months started to get established, and my stress and anxiety levels have started to come down. I've just had to put a lot of hard work into it. Like I say, a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of anxiety when things are a bit tight. But you just got to think to yourself, right, do I want to do something that I hate for the next 10, 20, 30 years? Or do I want to have a bit of confidence in myself, take a few risks, and maybe go through a bit of a stressful year or two, transitioning into something else that I'll hopefully enjoy. and just weighing it all up and maybe being inspired to make the decision to go for it, for the benefit of your own mental health, your own happiness, but also the sake of your marriage, your kids, and your wider relationships, and just weighing up
Absolutely.
it all.
And people don't have to do this alone. They can kind of try and get financial backing as well. You like speak to bank managers, put a case forward to kind of really put a business plan together for this and how you're going to earn that money, and in the process make yourself so much happier. Thank you so much, Lee. I've loved speaking with you, and I think these are really, really interesting points, and I hope this will inspire people working in mental health, but also those who might be listening to this who are thinking, oh, that's me. I didn't realize I was supposed to be happy in work. Where can people connect with you? What's your Instagram?
On Instagram, my Still Beam Lifter Instagram is Still Beam Lifter Midlands and Northwest. It might be Still Beam Lifter Mids and Northwest. So,
great. And we'll make sure it's on screen on YouTube and that it's in the show notes. Honestly, I've loved speaking with you, Lee. It's been a real privilege, and thank you for taking the time out of your evening to do this, because I know time is so precious.
You're more than welcome, and thanks again for asking me on.
Thank you.
Oh, how great is Lee? Honestly, chatting with him was a real pleasure, and I found it so uplifting. And thanks again to him for taking the time out to speak with me after his busy day at work. So we're already getting an idea of what some of the problems might be and how it can make you feel quite stuck, actually, quite downtrodden, quite entrenched, and how it might begin to feel like there's not much hope. I have to confess that I absolutely love this series on Amazon called Clarkson's Farm. Now, in case you're not a Jeremy Clarkson's fan, perhaps don't be put off at this stage, because it's honestly one of the favourite series of mine that I've ever watched. I found it so interesting having a closer look at farming and the farming community and the things that crop up within it. But of course, what we know is that farmers and people working in the farming industry are also reported to have higher than average suicide rates. Why could this be? I reached out to Sharon May, who is a trained counsellor and has done an MSc recently looking into farming and mental health. Let's take a closer look for some of the themes and debates and common issues and perspectives that might come up in this area. Hi, I just want to welcome along Sharon May to the podcast. Hi, Sharon.
Hi, how you doing?
Really well, thank you. Thanks for asking. How are you feeling now that you've handed in your research for your master's?
A big sense of relief. I don't think it's quite hit me yet. There's always that niggly thought that there's something else I should be doing, but I'll get used to it.
Yes, absolutely. And the nature of being an academic is that you might well start studying sooner than you imagined. Yeah. So obviously, I hope it's okay to say that you are immersed in farming yourself. You married into a farming community and a farming family, and you have now done research looking at what it's like to be a farmer's wife. Could you tell us a little bit, set the context really for why mental health is even a conversation in farming, if that's okay?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's often touted as a statistic that the suicide rates for those in farming are much higher than the general population, and it's one of the occupations with the highest suicide rates, unfortunately. I think the research into why has accelerated massively in recent years, which it's needed to do. There's so many contributing factors to why agriculture takes such a strain on mental health. But I think the interesting thing is that it doesn't just affect the principal farmer. It has a ripple effect into those around, partners, families, that sort of thing as well, because the nature of it is that it's a family business very often. So it affects more than that one person, but that one person is the linchpin for a lot of the pressure, I think.
Thank you. And I'm sort of racking my brains a little bit thinking about some of my learning for kind of this during my career, and remembering some kind of theories that maybe it's not necessarily about the number of people attempting to end their own life, but it's about the people that manage to do that. And actually in farming populations, people have got access to perhaps more space, more seclusion, and more kind of violent means. Is that still a current theme?
It's an interesting question to ask, because I think a lot of people put it down to, oh, it's got a high rate of suicide because of the access to lethal means, particularly firearms and things like that. Unfortunately, it just means that those who attempt tend to complete. I think suicide statistics in their own are an interesting, measurable way of assessing mental health in an industry, but they don't take into account those who don't attempt suicide, or those who have thought about suicide but haven't attempted it. And they don't take into account all those people who are struggling on a day-to-day basis with mental health issues. So whilst it is an interesting statistic to use to kind of illustrate the prevalence of mental health in farming, I think it's just the tip of a very large iceberg, to be fair.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, sort of thinking back on everybody I've ever assessed, really, it's very rare that someone hasn't told me they'd either attempted to end their own life or certainly been very close to it. And of course, I'm a skewed population because I'm a qualified clinical psychologist, having worked in trauma services. But I think this is endemic. And I guess we're talking specifically about men today. Even for a man to be in a service, seeing a therapist and turning up regularly is kind of hard. And I guess that's even harder in farming, where, we're putting barriers in place. If we're asking people to come into clinic, don't wear your wellies, don't be too smelly, all of that stuff. But also, how do you get cover to do that? How do you begin to tell people, or maybe you're just a lone farmer, how do you begin to have the space to do that, Sharon?
I think one of the biggest barriers to sort of help seeking when farmers are struggling with their mental health is that self-stigmatization, generalizing massively, but they're a practical, logical person, and they're used to be able to fix things. If something's broken, they find a way to fix it. Even if it's a botch job, they tie it up with a piece of baler twine until it works. Emotional stuff doesn't work like that, and I think they find that really destabilizing and see that as a bit of a failure. It's not helped by the masculine stereotypes that go along with farming, as with a lot of other masculine based industries. And then you've got the sort of the work ethic that is born from necessity but becomes a bit of a badge of honor. I haven't taken a day off the farm in 6 years, plus the practicalities of not being able to step away at certain times of year or certain times of the day, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of things in the way before someone can say, I need help, primarily admitting it to themselves, then admitting it to other people, then actually seeking the professional services that they might need. Geographic isolation always used to be a big factor because, literally stepping off the farm, COVID, if it's done anything, has proved that actually you can do a lot of that from the comfort of your own home. But still, then there's the element of privacy. your home is your workplace is your home. And there's a lot of things that just generally get in the way of kind of being able to take that step forward, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to confess, I might be profess, I'm not sure, to being a big fan of Clarkson's Farm. And that feels like it's illuminated some areas I'd never considered. Even, the maths element of how can we get profit out of this when there's actually very, very hard. The margins are so reliant upon the seasons, but also upon kind of government subsidies as well. And the kind of whether things are changing almost by the minute, it seems.
I think farming is a kind of, it's a difficult one because a farm is a home, and a home and a farm, that you're caught at both ends. You're a producer and a consumer. So when economically things start to squeeze, the cost of living goes up, but you're also getting less margin for your product. The supermarkets, the big sellers are paying less for what they get from their producers and charging more to their customers, and a farming family gets stung twice in that. So economically, it's very difficult. Then you've got things like sort of global events, the war in Ukraine affecting fertilizer prices, fuel prices, that sort of thing. So their costs of production are going up too, as well as the amount they're getting for their product. So financially, it's a really, really tough place to be. And then there's so much out of your control in terms of the weather. The weather can absolutely scupper you. There's animal disease, avian flu has been in the news a lot recently, TB, that sort of thing. And all these things that are nothing you have any control over can scupper an already very tight place that you find yourself in. And I think the pressures of that were highlighted by Jeremy Clarkson. I think a lot of people came up to us after that first series in particular and said, oh, we just had no idea. And I think that's part of it too. Some farmers are afraid of, well, not afraid, that's probably not the word, worried about talking to people because they just don't get it. There's that cultural isolation too. There's a feeling that the professionals they might talk to might not get the pressures of their job or understand the situation that they're in. And I think that also creates a bit of a gap.
Absolutely. And if people listening or watching to this are thinking about how they could be a better friend or a better family member to someone in farming, or a better clinician if they're working with kind of farmers or wanting to engage farmers, what's the one top thing they could do, Sharon?
Oh, that's a big question. I think it's difficult because not many people know a farmer. Like, not many people can go and hug a farmer. It doesn't work like that. But those that do, check in. But I think as consumers, we have a responsibility to be more careful about the choices we make in order to support an industry that is on its bottom, so to speak, at the moment. And I think as professionals, flexibility is a big thing, which for those of us who are used to working in sort of regular weekly slots at certain times, that sort of thing, it's being open to working in a slightly different way, in the same that you would, I don't know, with shift workers, that sort of stuff. To kind of go into it with an open mind about, there's a certain amount of mistrust between farmers and health professionals sometimes, because historically there hasn't been that understanding of their industry in physical health as well as mental health. So kind of as a practitioner going into that sort of with a bit of an open mind, knowing that trust really has to be established. I mean, it does with all relationships, but particularly with that one, I think it's probably shaky to start with. And if a farmer turns up asking for mental health support, they really need mental health support. There's anecdotal evidence that if a farmer turns up in A&E, he's probably really injured. Take him seriously, or he's really sick. And I think it's the same with mental health too.
Absolutely. And thinking about whether we can kind of prioritize as key worker, accordingly in our services. And I think another thing that Clarkson's Farm has done quite well is highlight there's real joy possible in farming as well.
Yeah.
And actually those still moments, the moments where you're just at one with nature, it really does show us the appeals of farming, doesn't it?
I think that's really true. I mean, most people are in farming because they have an affinity for it, because they love the lifestyle, they love the job, they love the animals. And if you were talking to a member of a public who was suffering with depression, you'd tell them to get out in nature, get some fresh air, do something physical, all these things that like farming, tick, tick, tick. But it's almost like the pressure of the other stuff is preventing that from happening. It should be a wholesome, engaging lifestyle, but the external pressures are such that at the moment it's very hard to enjoy it. You do get those bits in between for sure, and that's why those who still farm.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for your time today, Sharon. I think this has illuminated some really important considerations for people who might be working with farmers or would like to work with farmers. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Sharon for your time and for illuminating us into this area that's so important. If you are in farming yourself or if you're working in mental health, hopefully that gives you some interesting insight and some ways to help think about making mental health care accessible to all. But we're already beginning to piece together a narrative that actually it's tricky to get men through the door of a traditional mental health service. And so that's why I really wanted to think about what is out there that could be the difference that is making the difference or could be the difference that makes the difference. I chatted with Charlie Bethel, the CEO of Men's Sheds UK, thinking about how his organisation can be and is becoming a difference that can make the difference for men. Hi, Charlie. Welcome along to the podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Tell us a little bit about Men's Sheds and why that is so powerful.
So men's sheds are safe spaces for men, and it's somewhere where men can go to create or to connect or to just communicate, just talk, as I say. And the majority of men's sheds are woodworking shops, but they'll do metalwork, they'll do 3D printing, they'll do all sorts of things. And then we've got some sheds that just play music, and we've got a shed that is a chicken shed. So they just go, and the group of men there will go and look after chickens. The use of men is a little bit, it's not necessarily completely fair because a number of sheds now have women, but generally there's always a men's only session. And it's that piece that really works. It's magic on the men that go to them. And then there may be mixed sessions or women only sessions as well. And there are women only sheds. But we keep men in the title because we're there for men's health, and our vision is healthier and happier men.
Yeah, which has a knock-on effect for society as well, for the families and the friends around these men.
It does, and many people that come to the shed come because it's their wife has taken them down to the shed, or their daughters have said that they should go to the shed. And it's there was one occasion not so long ago where a shed in Reading had a wife come down, drag the husband and say, "I'm going shopping, you're not leaving until you've signed up." And that's very often what happens. And the analogy we use is that if you put 12 men in a square room, which is quite important that it's square, and ask them to talk about their feelings, 6 will leave immediately, and the other 6 will try to find the corners of the room. And being men, we can't work out that 6 doesn't go into 4. However, if you put a lawnmower in the room and say, "Fix it," after 2 hours, they will know each other intimately because they will work shoulder to shoulder. They'll talk, they'll know the names of their children, their grandchildren, what ails them. And it has further impact, not only from a mental health perspective, but also from a physical health perspective. And there's lots of examples where shedders have not ganged up on somebody, but subtly convinced them to go to the doctors and sort out an ailment. And it's really seen blind people see. There's been some people that have lost their sight, and actually going to the shed has made them then go to the doctors and resolve those problems. There are a number of stats we can give you on suicide or on anxiety and depression that it's better than any pill you can get on the NHS.
Yeah, it's the inclusion, isn't it? And the being seen and being part of something and feeling heard and feeling like you matter. And so much of what we know about depression can be the opposite of that.
Yeah. And it's the sense of purpose. So you go to a shed to make something for yourself, you go to the shed to make something for your family or for friends. And then because you can be on your own in the shed, you don't have to be working with the other shedders. But then there's that sense of purpose when you're making things for the local train station or local school. One shed recently last year made 17 xylophones for a school. There's no glockenspiels. I always get that wrong. Apparently they're different. But unfortunately for the children, they then played them to them. But it's just that sense of pride that it gives them and that sense of purpose, which is really important. And I think that when people talk about Maslow's hierarchy, that sense of purpose should be in there front and center, because it makes all the difference. And we have people say to us, I had a choice: go to the men's shed or die by sofa. And it genuinely is that. And there was one guy from Redcar. This was in the newspaper, and you've got to bear in mind we're talking about men here, so them actually opening up and telling these stories afterwards is a huge step, and shows how safe they feel. One guy was going to the sea to end his life, and on the way there he bumped into somebody who started talking to him about the men's shed. Was really enthusiastic, didn't know why this guy was walking down this path. The guy turned around, went to see the shed with him, and he hasn't gone back since. And we hear that story time and time again, and it is about that safe environment. It might take somebody 5-6 times to walk through the door of a shed. It's like they're casing out the joint, but when they do come through, they find a very non-invasive, non-questioning culture, an environment where they can thrive. And as I say, that there are plenty of stories. We did a survey. There's 1,180 sheds across the UK at the moment, and we did a survey asking a number of questions around health and well-being. And one was, do you believe your shed has saved a life? And 25% said yes. There was 178 replied, so quite a reasonable chunk. 25% said yes, and 14% said yes, we believe so. And some of those 25% said yeah, and that includes me. And that wasn't a question of like that you might have felt that way later on to end your life. It was direct, yes, this has saved my life. And if a shed has done one thing and it's done that, then the whole movement's been worthwhile.
Absolutely. It's incredibly powerful stuff. And to get those, those real case study examples, it's obvious, it's just life-changing for people. Does it matter if somebody's never picked up a saw or a chisel or a spanner in their life?
Only for their fingers. No, it doesn't matter. Many people that go to sheds won't have done anything before. So a shed leader will have done, because they just keep a bit of oversight of what's going on, like open the door. Most sheds, if not all, will do some vetting first in terms of, do you know to use this machine? Right, okay, well, let me show you how to do it, and put people through and sign them off on machinery and equipment. The most dangerous tool in a workshop is probably the Stanley knife. No, the sheds will start off with simple projects for people if they've never done anything before. And so bird boxes. So if the WI is Jam and Jerusalem, men's sheds are bird boxes and tea. So there are lots of bird boxes made, but there's lots of wood turning. To turn a bowl, it's it's a relatively easy thing to learn. And there are different techniques for people at different levels. And if your hand grip isn't as strong, there's other devices you can use. And some people just go and just have a cup of tea in the shed. They don't actually engage in anything. So, but they engage in the community. So it doesn't matter. I mean, at the other end, I should say the first shed I ever went to see, there was a lady in there making a bird table, and the nails that were sticking out of this bird table would have impaled a robin from 100 yards, and it was frightening. And my degree was design, so I'm looking at it thinking, do I really want to come and work somewhere like this, or for a charity like this? But the joy that she had, and the joy that the other shedders had seeing her create that, was just immeasurable. I mean, that was fantastic. And then at the other end of the scale, you see people making friezes for the backs of churches, so wooden carvings, and you see the most incredible pieces of art and design that are created, and trains for the for Father Christmas sleighs. When he lands and he has to go around the local streets, that they create those for him. It's a huge range of things that they can create, but you start one nail at a time. There's only one person I've seen in a shed not be able to use a tool, and it'd probably be too political for me to say that was the former Prime Minister visiting one. So, but the shedders really do help bring on other people. It's a non-competitive environment. There's they leave egos at the door generally.
And there's scope for everybody. Even if you don't get on very well the first time, we can all grow. We can all develop new skills.
Yeah, and it's different to say art. I remember this one of our funders saying to me, telling me off because I said, it's not too dissimilar to art classes, and she said, no. In an art class, you might be sat next to Constable or next to Pablo Picasso. That would dishearten you. In a shed, you can just be sanding down the wood and get the satisfaction of it. So she was one of our very many advocates, and I got wrapped.
Amazing. And are they all free for people to join and come along to?
So they vary. So some sheds ask for a donation. Other sheds might say it's £1 a session. Other sheds might have it's a £100 for a year's membership, and then you can pay that over that time. But it's usually by declaration means test it. And if somebody's struggling, the shed will always find a way of keeping them in there. And I think every shed I've ever spoken to would not put the cost as an obstacle for somebody joining. And the UK Men's Sheds Association's founder was at Camden Shed, set up Camden Shed. And the first guy who came through the door was living on £5 a week because he had an argument with the DHS, whatever they were called at the time. He was mending his own shoes. He was doing all of those activities. And after 3 months, he said to them, I'd have been dead if it wasn't for this place. And it was because they didn't charge, but because they were so welcoming as well. And he had nothing else in his life to go to at that time. He no longer goes to that shed. He's got a job. He's got somewhere to live. It's a very different story because the shed gave him that confidence. And so, yeah, it's an incredible power. And it's been coined as therapy that dare not speak its name, the Men's Shed. I prefer soft play for men, but it really does have that kind of cheeky impact as well. So yeah.
So it's a case by case, shed by shed basis, but finances are not a reason to not go because there's something can always be done. If you need the shed, then the shed needs you.
Yeah.
How do people find? Sorry, you go.
No. Well, the only obstacle is that sheds are at capacity at the moment. So we're trying to help sheds with training and finding other premises and more sheds to open because a lot of sheds have waiting lists, which should never happen. They're trying to open more days where they can, but a lot of sheds are open 5 days a week and looking at, well, do we do evenings? Do we do weekends? And that's starting to happen around the shed network as well. So that's probably the only barrier that's there at the moment.
Okay. And how do people find their closest shed or try and get themselves on a waiting list or see if there's space available?
So there's an app on our website, which is mensheds.org.uk. There's a find a shed tool. You type in your postcode. You remember to click search, which is always my issue when I do it. And then it comes up with all the local sheds. And it will have their contact details, whether that's a phone number or an email address. But also, if there isn't a shed in your area, we're there to try and help create more sheds. But sheds need to be created by the men and women in their local community because then it becomes sustainable. There are a number of shed projects where somebody sets up a shed and pays for somebody to run it, but they usually they're not very sustainable. And even if they've lasted 10 years, they then just collapse. And we're seeing this quite a lot now. Whereas if you build it from that community, and we help to do that, you see a very strong, sustainable shed with all the income that it needs to continue to exist and to grow and develop. And some sheds have got over 200 members.
Okay. Well, it really does sound like you're changing lives. And if people are touched by this and want to donate to the Men's Sheds Association, can they?
Yes, again on our website there is an opportunity to do that, or just to email in and speak to us, particularly if that function's broken again. But they could do that. But just give us a call and find out more about us and what we're doing. So there may be some local sheds that you want to support.
And are Men's Sheds on social media? Can people follow you on socials?
Yes, we're on all of the things that are on social media, which I don't know how to use, but yes, no, we're on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram.
I'll make sure
TikTok.
it's on. I'll make sure
Yeah.
it's on the screen and in the show
Well,
notes, and people can
yes.
follow.
No, we're on
Thank
all
you
those
so
kind of
much for
things.
your time and for everything that you and your organisation do to support men and, in fact, women in men's sheds.
Thank you, Marianne.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Charlie and indeed all of our guests for their time in speaking with me so that we can help build this narrative around what can be done to better include men so that we can get this suicide rate reduced more generally, but also to think about reducing the incidence of male suicide specifically. I would love your thoughts around this. Have you found this a useful episode? Has it inspired your thinking, either for your own mental health or that of someone else that you support? Please do let me know in the comments if watching on YouTube. Please do subscribe, like, share to the teams that you're working with, be they clinical or be they on a building site, in a farm, or just down the pub. If you're listening as an MP3, please do consider rating and reviewing on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I'm Dr. Marianne Trent. It is my privilege and pleasure to speak with you and to bring you this really important content. If you would like to connect with me, please do come and join my Facebook group, the Aspiring Psychologist Community with Dr. Marianne Trent. Thank you so much for being part of my world. Take care.